Hello, welcome to Internet Use Violations, Threats Over the World Wide Web, a case study for ED 850VB, Module 16 by Evan Manning. First is Category 1, Problem Identification and Analysis. A. What we know. The background. Setting. Slattery Steno High School, an affluent area in a large city. There were some individuals that were involved. First was Dr. Harvey, who was a principal for 9 years. He was award-winning and focused on reputation of self and school. Also was Miss Tate. She was a newer but well-educated teacher, as she had already finished her master's and another year of education before beginning the specific teaching experience. She had high expectations through high rigor for her students and didn't have any outside family. The event in question. There was a Facebook page which was made. This included derogatory comments. The comments were specifically targeted over the rigor or the difficulty, if you will, of the class, and also hinted at some personal behaviors of the teacher that was being utilized. It also used offensive language, and at the end, I would say hinted at a threat toward her. Specifically, Miss Tate indicated that it was a death threat when she talked with Dr. Harvey later in that evening. I'm not sure if I would go quite that far, but I do think that it's something that probably needs to be handled and minimally would need to be discussed to try to figure out legal ramifications, whether it's being criminal or civil, as we will see further. B, what we need to know. There are some key facts that would be yet to be unveiled that we would need to know. First, who created the page? When was it created? Do details in the page have details narrowing down the creator? Is this a legal issue outside the school? Is the teacher safe at school? And what were the personal behaviors in question in the post? Again, I think I really try to focus on through being fair and ethical as an administrator towards the entirety of the student population, in also maybe having an uncomfortable lens of looking at any validity towards Miss Tate. Again, it's not something that we want to discuss, and obviously we'd like to hope this was all just a prank, but sometimes the information that we get through these pranks is important, and if there is validity depending upon what that information was for student safety and student fairness for all the student population, we'd have to take an accurate and a deep look into that information. And some of the information I talk about will focus on that as an element as well. C was identifying the problem. The problem at hand there's really three parts. First, who created the page? That's the starting point or the stasis point for anything going forward. As the page with or without validity is unacceptable and would need some form of consequence through the school. But the second one that would be important would be to isolate if there were legal consequences outside the school, whether it's being criminal or civil, that would need to be addressed. And three, do any of the accusations need to be looked into regarding Miss Tate preemptively? Again, you don't want to find out later that this information is true, there's something there, especially if there's a fight back and forth, post consequences, which we'll get to later on. Category 2 was the plan of action with strategies. Step 1. Using a combination of teacher and student interviews, try and narrow the creator and set consequence as a BOE or strategic plan guidelines would indicate. Again, I think it's probably important to find the creator of the individual post as probably a starting point, but then when consequences occur, you obviously need to follow any sort of a BOE or strategic plan that you would already have discussed, because that's going to isolate later on as to get to ethical and integrity and fairness for the individual students as those actions. The data utilized that for this information from the text could be the page itself, obviously a wide variety of interviews that are non-targeted or discriminatory or inflammatory, and 3, limiting Miss Tate's immediate reaction information. Again, in the text itself, they speak about how she felt, how she thought it was a death threat, and who she actually thought could have been the culprit and why. Again, some of that could be important later on, but I think you have to distance yourself from that immediate reaction, or you risk obviously not being ethical or fair to the students, which I think is ultimately the most important thing for the administrator as per this case study. Step two would be using resource officer or officers in central office determining the legal implications outside the school purview. Data utilized. Again, the text of the page, which included the threat, would obviously be problematic. It would be something that would need to be looked at and seeing if there was any validity to it. Two would be if the site was created in fully off school grounds technology, then obviously it could be more of a legal than a school matter. And three, communication would be very key with central office here. This could obviously be something that could blow up, especially in this large metropolitan area with other social media, with the type of parents that you would have with the media. And I think trying to communicate with the central office, there's no surprises, would be both important as having good ethical and integrity while you're making actions, but also obviously save yourself any sort of risks associated there. In step three, we're determining through interviews and other resources any, if any, validity to the student's post. Again, you don't want to assume that Miss Tate is the problem, but I do think to completely discount any of that is now not being fair and an ethical administrator for the student needs. Which again is sort of the lens of which we were supposed to start. So data utilized, the specific inclusion of what the text indicated was personal behavior, could be something or nothing. I think actually seeing that would be important. We didn't get to see that in the actual text. And it may be obvious in a real situation if we could, but either way, looking into it proactively would be key. If there is validity and the student is gone, sort of after that scenario, the retaliation may very well be this information being disseminated publicly later. You want to be proactive, not reactive to that scenario. Category three, resolution based on all student success. All student success. So what is it? What's the point? Again, the rubric indicated that promoting the academic success and personal well-being of every student is a key focal point for all decisions that be made. So what data procedures need to be guides to meet this lens of a strategic vision? Interviews would be fair and untargeted. The student innocence must be a starting point, not an end point. Miss Tate's emotional reaction should be limited as well as data derived. Communication should be tantamount, again, whether that's with parents, students, Miss Tate, or central office, very important there. And any consequence that would be given would really need to be focused and aligned with the set rules, whether that be the strategic plan for the school or BOE policies. Again, you don't want to try to do something that's outside of that or starts to become targeted. And obviously at that point, you have a lot of other issues that could be down the pipeline, as well as important to being a fair and ethical administrator. The resolution should be quick, fair, focused on culture of safety and ethics is the overall identity of what the resolution would need to be in order to meet promoting all success and personal well-being for every student. Category four was the debrief section. So first, thoughts. What could have been done to prevent this in the first place? I think as any administrator, someone in a position of leadership, you don't want to just try to be good at solving problems as they happen, but you want to be better at preventing them. I think that's going to be something that I would have a thought of post this scenario. Two, is this an isolated page? Usually no, right? If there's issues with one student and one teacher, how many other either teachers does this person have a problem with that could be are out there from the singular student, or if it's the teacher who's sort of creating the culture in the classroom to cause these issues and lash outs, are there other students doing similar pages for the same teacher? And these are things that I've said to be worried about. And again, are there more skeletons in the digital closet, whether it be, again, about her or from the student for others, are all going to be thoughts I would have, sort of those hard to sleep at night issues that'll also come up on the ongoing questions momentarily. Feelings. So what would I be feeling during this process? Again, I think nervous about what is to come would obviously be there. Maybe the more experience we have going through these processes, that would really help. But I think your immediate reaction should be both nervous about what is still out there, as well as number two, being anxious for closure. I do think it's important not to try to jump to closure to try to alleviate this anxiousness, because again, when doing so, jumping to those conclusions can lead to some unethical or some unfair practices, which obviously we want to limit. And then three, fear of doing the outcome poorly. I mean, I think you would want the outcome to be fair and balanced, but I think in the end, if it is, a lot of this goes away. If it's not, almost everything else that came before would now be called into question. So what would I be valuing during this time? One was opinions of other admin. Again, if you have an admin team, I think valuing those opinions is important, or other admins have gone through a similar scenario. Two, central office connection. Again, as talked about previously, that connection with central office being on one page, that we all have the same vision for what needs to happen for the safety of our employees, but also for the fairness and the ethical responsibility we have as models for our students. I think those things have to be very important, both to protect yourself, but also to continue the vision of the school. And three, the school resource officer. Again, if this is going to have civil and or criminal implications, you really want to be working with that person, and to have someone who can take that weight off of our shoulders, as that's not our specific area of expertise, would be very important and something I would value. The rubric wanted to make sure that we integrated three issues that are unresolved or open for further investigation. So highlighting those, even though they've sort of been hinted at in the past. One, is there more coming out about Miss Tate? Obviously, that would be something unresolved and open to be discussed. Two, are there legal ramifications coming down the pipeline? Obviously, important things there that could have longer and lasting impacts even after the school year. And three, are there more students or posts coming out? Again, those are going to be things that I would think about. There's sort of those lasting questions. Category 5 were the reflections. There were three specific areas or components to be discussed. The first was that the educator or education leader at the building level applied knowledge that promoted the success of every student by acting with integrity. And three specific examples were: one, open communication with central office. Hiding information or a lack of transparency would be negative. Two, honesty with all students and staff needs to be a model of integrity, and the honesty is a key component. And three, being honest to Ms. Tate is important, but honesty for all students is a prior question. And this could lead to some uncomfortable conversations with Ms. Tate, but again, that keeps the integrity with the students afloat, which is the prior question. Component 2 specifically targeted the question of fairness. Again, number 1, not targeting specific students early in the process would be key to fairness. 2, following predetermined consequences as per BOE or school policies would be key to fairness. And 3, again, being fair to Ms. Tate is important, but fairness for the students is a prior question. Those are very similar, but I think that the question of ethics and fairness and integrity need to be separated a touch there. Again, you can be honest with her, but you also have to be fair to both parties involved. And component 3, which was the ethical questions involved as the building level leader, 3 key examples utilized in the case study. 1, keeping outside interference at a minimum is ethical to the student needs. 2, not divulging information or trying to back Ms. Tate's wishes early is ethical to the students. And 3, allowing a fair and balanced look into the interviews and letting the information lead to a resolution rather than the inverse, which would lead to an ethical outcome from an ethical administrator and model. I think those are the key components to the case study, and we're all very interesting with Module 16. Thank you.